Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to Radio Sophia. It's been quite some time, and now we are back with another season of exciting talks. And today we have Ashok Gurram with us, and he is currently pursuing his PhD at Department of Political Science in the University of Hyderabad. For his PhD thesis, he is working on the topic Decoding the Politics of Technology and Welfare, a study of Aadhaar-based services in Telangana State. Ashok has also pursued his MPhil and his integrated Masters in Master of Arts from University of Hyderabad, where he specialized in political science. His research areas or interests include public policy, Michel Foucault, human rights, peace, administrative ethics, and surveillance. And he has two publications in the recent time, one of which he is going to discuss today. The topic of the title of the paper is The Biopolitics of Caste, Analyzing the Dishonor Killings in South India, which is published in Contemprary Voice of Dalit 2022. So those of you who are interested in this can also take a look at the paper. And Ashok, thank you very much for accepting our invitation and being here. And it is not a coincidence that many of our talks on Radio Sophia on the topic of caste has come from research scholars at the University of Hyderabad, which has a very rich scholarship in analyzing or discussing about caste. And I'm sure you're going to continue the same legacy here and enlighten us about a very stimulating topic. The floor is yours. So we will have a 35 to 40-minute talk by you, and then we can open up the discussion. And I would request the audience to keep your questions to clarificatory questions during the talk, and after which we can have a lengthy, elaborate discussions. Ashok, floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Kranti. Thank you for your kind invitation. Actually, let me tell a few things before I start this lecture.
Ashok, I'm very sorry. Can I interrupt you? Would you like to turn on your video? Your video is off.
Okay. No. That is am I visible?
Yes, now you are. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Before I want to start this lecture on my paper, I want to tell a few things about the recent incidents. Of course, all of us are already witnessing the undesirable things in the name of the honor killings. But why did I land up with this paper is because I was trying to read Foucault for my research, but especially for surveillance kind of stuff. But when I was reading Foucault for surveillance, the way Foucault was analyzing the medieval Christian morality and also the governance practices, they are nothing but more similar to, they resemble the Indian Manus, whatever the Manusmriti prescription to the rest of the Indians, in the society. So there I really thought that that led me to search for something like, whether anybody wrote a work, wrote anything on the biopolitics of caste. And luckily I found only two works, one by Anupama Rao, another one by Ananya Vajpayee. But they are not really in detail enough, but they were also discussing the violence part in a different way. So then I really thought that more so these, honor killings are taking place. So I really thought I should give a try, and that's how I came up. And also, when we read Ambedkar original volumes and Foucault's original writings, we can find immense similarity in analyzing the religious morality that try to regulate the individual's everyday life. Ambedkar, though he didn't use the exact word biopolitics, but he was really hitting at how the political organization of the society is taking place in India. So, there is such an immense relevance for Ambedkar volumes in that context, for that matter. So, that's what I want to say. And yeah, now what is the business of biopolitics here for us to understand the honor killings is because the entire business of marital relationships revolve around two concepts for any community, for any anthropologist to discuss. These are two things. One is exogamy, the other one is endogamy. And the exogamy, in simplest words, is nothing but marrying a person from your from outside your community. Endogamy is nothing but marrying within the community. So here, the endogamy, scholars, whoever worked on endogamy is of our topic, and also he describes the definition of the endogamy is that it's an obligation to marry within the objectively defined group. So here we can start a discussion from our discussion on honor killings. So Ambedkar has already warned us long ago that wherever the caste Hindus go, they are capable of taking or spreading the same caste across the world. I mean, it's because they have this definitive practice of marrying within the community, because they believe that it's a matter of purity of the kinship, and it's a matter of the purity and pollution. Hence, the caste for marriage is such an important social institution for everybody that all of us know. But what is that Foucault would come up here? It's because when Foucault was working on something like archives for his genealogy of morals, he was reading the Catholic Church archives, where he encountered that he read most of the confessions by the practitioners, the believers. All these confessions were all mostly about the sexual practices and the sexual thoughts. That Foucault tries to say that the caste as an institution tried to church as an institution, as a social institution, as the religious institution tried to regulate the sexuality in its circulation of word and actions. They tried to impose something that no individual can think or imagine of sexuality beyond the prescribed morality. And one cannot really even think of an affair or any sexual desire outside the Christian morality. And that is condemned. Even if you have any such thought, you must come to the church and confess to the Pope. And there were papers that you should sign that you had such thought, and you should submit to the church, and your sin will be cleansed after that. That was the practice. And when you read something like that by Foucault, Foucault comes up with his argument that he sees this practice of organizing community by organizing the community based on such kind of governance. He calls it as an innovative technique to control the population. So their population becomes the subject of the state interest as well, interest of the church as well. So because population is not a mere a group of individuals, but it is beyond that. It's because the state is always interested in the healthy population and their reproduction as well. Foucault was talking about the 17th century practices where the state and the church are actively involved in regulating the sexuality of the people, and also the code of conduct that they should follow while they are having their in private times. That is the level of the regulation that individuals are subjected to during the 17th century. In that context, even in Indian caste system also, you can see the similarity that the endogamy is not a mere an affair of the marrying someone within your community, but beyond that, it's all about controlling the sexuality of individuals and their purity of the community. And it's all about managing the sexuality of the population based on their purity and pollution. Here, the principle of endogamy takes place in the honor killings. And most of these honor killings are justified in the name of the honor, though some of the scholars like Patel and others argue that the violence does not command the honor anymore, but it commands the dishonor. Hence, I titled my paper as a dishonor killings in that context. So here, though the enterprise of biopolitics seemed to be a pre-modern affair, but it still has relevance because the question of caste and the problem of inter-caste marriages are still persisting, and the way the violence it commands is also problematic. Another biopolitical scholar of the biopolitics, Agamben, comes up with this analogy that in the Italian society, there are homosas. Homosas is nothing but an individual who does not have any legal protection by the state and the church. And he lives outside the society. If anybody kills him, the killer is not liable to the punishment. Similarly, though the word Dalit indicates something like broken and all, also lives outside the civil laws, civil protection of the laws by the state. I'm talking about the codification of the Manu laws, where there was no legal protection for the Atishudra or the Dalit. So here, the Indian Dalit resembles the Homosas of Agamben scholarship. So here, when we see these honor killings, whenever a Dalit boy or Dalit woman is killed, it is always justified that it is like a very normal thing that, okay, they crossed the social norms and he is killed. How can we imagine the pain of the daughter's family? And the father must be going a lot of agony, and also his community men must be expelling him and his family from the community, this thing. So that's how the honor killings, the so-called dishonor killings, are justified. And there is another thing in this biopolitics is that though we know that this caste system is based on such a hierarchy and graded inequalities, that Foucault comes to analyze these things, that there are, for any state, for that matter, for any religion, always two types of races, the super race and the sub race. Here, the super race is supposed to rule the society and the state together, and the sub race, let's say the so-called subalterns or whatever, the Dalits like ours, are supposed to serve the upper class or the upper caste. So the super race is to be served by the sub race. Hence, if this norm is broken anytime, the super race tries to impose such a morality that these sub race can be eliminated like anything. And this elimination physically is justified because the morality allows it. The morality mostly that Foucault talks is drawn from the religious sanction and religious sanctity in the word. I mean, that's how the Foucault comes up with. So when there is no legal protection, when there is a social sanction for those killings, definitely these killings are normalized like anything. And moreover, when we take, there is always a distinction. Why did I have to come up with this South India thing is because when you see North Indian Kap panchayats and honor killings, mostly the girl is killed there. Of course, the boy is also killed. So in most of the instances, but their underlining philosophy is that the woman, be it wife, daughter, and the include words like Jori, Jor, Jamin, and Beti. Wife, land, and daughter are the possessions of the males, and the protection. It is the duty of the male, especially men, upper caste men, to protect them against any kind of external aggression. Thus, the so-called Purushartha is upheld. So when it comes to South Indian case, you see girls' family coming and attacking the Dalit boy, or the if that boy happens to be even OBC also, it is subjected to that. I will come to that part, the individual cases. So here, this seems to be a minimal difference, but it has a lot of message that, again, Foucault says that this is a coercive way of disciplining the society. This killing does not mere indicate the caste pride alone, but it is a message to the rest of the society that if anybody crosses the caste line, or the so-called caste morality, is subjected to similar kind of punishment. So here, the punishment is used as a technique. That's what the Foucault discusses in his Crime and Punishment. So discipline and punish. So it is a disciplining technique. This is how the Dalit boys or the Dalit men, and of course the women in general across all the communities, including upper caste women, are made to be a docile individuals, docile subjects, those who cannot question the authority, those who cannot rebel against the established norm. So the entire project of using the coercive power and the so-called religious morality is to create resilient citizens and the resilient subjects who do not even question the norms. That's what the violence entails. So does it, when it comes to South India, let's say, since we are talking about South India, doesn't South India have these caste violences earlier? Yes, South India has. When you take Karam Chedu, Sunduru, or any other caste atrocities, but they do not have this inter-caste factor explicitly. Of course, there are purity, pollution kind of thing. In the details of the individual cases, if we take something like Sunduru case, where an Dalit boy called Kanchak Koteshu, he was working for a upper caste family. He was allegedly said to have some illicit affair or the love with an upper caste woman. So he was, for that thing, he was on the pretext of, he was killed under the pretext of some theft. So then Kalekuri Prasad came up with his own poem, poem known as Untouchable Love, to the memory of Kanchak Koteshu, where he discusses that the woman is also crippled of expressing her feelings and her freedom of sexuality, and on par with the Dalit men. The sad part is that the woman, though having that upper caste tag, could not open up that she fell in love with the Dalit man. And also, and that's how he approaches the caste factor in the so-called inter-caste love. The woman does not have freedom, and the men does, of course, the men is always condemned to the death. That's how the brutality, you can see the brutality of punishing a Dalit man for his inter-caste love or inter-caste marriage. Kanchak Koteshu was tied to the tree and burnt alive after beating for the whole day. What does it indicate? This is nothing but a medieval practice where prisoners are subjected to the brutality by plucking out all their vital organs and displaying it to the European society, during medieval times. So this is how the church and the state involved in disciplining the citizens to prevent the crimes and prevent the so-called immoral activities. This is the similar practice, the caste. Of course, Manu has clearly sanctioned these things. If a Dalit, if a untouchable learns Vedas or studies anything, he is liable to the punishment, something like cutting off his tongue. These kind of severity of punishments indicate that all these projects of legal sanctions behind killings and also the societal sanctions indicate the disciplining the individuals. And also, every time you see these things, most of the times the individual, be it woman or the Dalit man, their bodies become the target of violence, and that's how the body is uh, source of the violence, and they take it to the next level of disciplining the citizens. And you take another example from Tamil Nadu, where Udalampet Shankar's case. And though the woman was out in open that she fell in love with this boy, they got married and they were living already together, but the girl's father came up with the attacks and again he killed. And that was again a brutal killing, and the woman stood up for the boy who deceased. And she went to the court. The court also gave the almost capital punishment to that culprit. But the fact is that the biopolitics, how the biopolitics operate here, when the morality would like to make use of the other functionaries of the state, it can go to the extent of using the judiciary against the victim also. That's how the caste morality, even in case of Udalampet Shankar's case also, got the punishment commuted to the life imprisonment. And that's how you see the biopolitics operating through judiciary also. I mean, that's how things get normalized, and you cannot see beyond a point that these things are taken seriously either by the state and the judiciary. And even in case of the recent killings in Telangana, one in Nalgonda, where Pranay was killed for marrying an uppercast girl. He was killed in daylight. And another incident in Mantani, where Mantani Madhukar was killed for falling in love with an uppercast, not even uppercast exactly, OBC, dominant OBC girl. So in all these atrocities, the only thing, the single pattern one we can see is that the caste pride is hurt, and the reaction is always through violence, and this violence reflects the so-called caste values, the caste morality in quote unquote, that one should not marry or one should not have any sexual relationship outside the community. And this is how these things are justified. And there they try to bring honor into all these things. And also my interest in studying these things is that this is a technique of exercising the power where both women and also Dalit men can be disciplined so that they will never question the endogamy and the further morality imposed by the caste system. And when we get into the deep of this caste functioning, unfortunately, the similar morality is also operated within the Dalit fold as well. When you see, this is what the major question posed by Kalekuri Prasad. Why I'm quoting him again and again, because he came up with moral. He was the first person to question the moral basis of Dalit movement in entire Telugu states. He questioned the morality of Dalit movement, asking that why it could not go for the social solidarity, something like why Dalit groups within themselves cannot go for inter-caste marriages. The irony is that the Dalit movement could not argue for the inter-caste marriages within the Dalit communities. There in Telugu states, there are around 61 or more than 61 subgroups or subcaste within the Dalit fold, but none of them have openly agreed or performed any kind of inter-caste marriages. Though Baba Saheb Ambedkar advised that breaking the endogamy is the first step towards annihilation of the caste. There, the Kalekur Prasad's question becomes very important, that why Dalit movement could not question the morality of the Dalit movement. I mean, something like why they didn't come up with this thing. There is another Telugu novel where Gaddam Mohan Rao, I think he is the only one questioned in his novel that, when within the Madigas, those who questioned the hierarchy within Dalit fold could not tolerate other sub-Madiga groups try to marry or fall in love with the Madiga girls. So the intensity of this violence is that it operates at every subcaste and also at every sexual choice of every individual within the caste fold, that they cannot break this now. And the violence repeatedly comes as a weapon, as a technique of power to discipline the individuals. So here what I would like to conclude by saying that women's, let me put it this way, that always the family of the honor of a family of the girl is always contingent on the woman's freedom of marriage, always contingent on women's sexuality. So here, controlling women's sexuality is such a technique of exercising power that the purity of every caste can be kept intact, so that the so-called Hindu Dharma can also operate through so-called modern democratic society as well. So this so-called democracy that we enjoy is again becoming a source for the caste morality when we use this honor and all these things by suppressing women's sexuality and Dalit men's sexuality. So and I'll try to conclude by reading out a poem where this disciplining was not only is not new to Indian society, but also existed in elsewhere as well. Whenever we see these killings of the inter-caste couple and all, suddenly we get to see the bodies one fine morning, the way the American society witnessed the popping up of black bodies hanging to the trees and all. Though this is an anonymous poem, I think most of the Dalit bodies killed in these honor killings might reflect similarly. The poet says that the southern trees bear strange fruit, bled on the leaves and bled at the root. Black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant south, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouths, the scene of magnolias, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is the fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather, for the wind to suck, for the sun to rot, for the trees to drop. Here is the strange fruit and bitter crop. So this crop, the bitter crop that the poet is referring to, is nothing but the dead bodies of the black people. The way we can see here, whenever Dalit massacre takes place, whenever the honor killings takes place, we see such a strange bitter crop, which is justified and by the caste morality. Thank you. Thank you, Kranti, for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Ashok. That was a very intense discussion. I will just open the floor for the questions now. And if anyone has any questions, you can either put it in the chat box or raise your hand and unmute yourself. So we already have one question from Vamsi, Ashok. Vamsi Surapogu. He's asking, how do we understand the recent killing of a Dalit boy by a Muslim man for marrying Muslim girl?
Okay.
Ashok, your
Can't.
video is off again. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Vamshi. So though the basis of Indian society, let's begin from there, because though Indian society has a different religions, but uh, the conversions could not really eliminate the caste morality, because this is what Ambedkar warned, that wherever the caste Hindus go, they can carry the same thing. Even if they go to the new planet also, they can carry. This conversion from Hindu religion to other religion does not really eliminate the caste morality as such. So Islam is equally infected with the caste morality as well, and hence they have the similar graded inequalities and functioning. Sayyids and Ashrafs do not really consider the lower ranks Muslims on par with them, and they really do not extend the so-called Islamic brotherhood to them. So, though I also read that thing that the boy was agreeing to convert to Islam, but the girl's family didn't agree, because it is evident that he is not perceived per se as equal to convert to their ranks in the Islam. So I think it's nothing but the same thing. Again, yeah, the other point what I would like to say, again, you see the woman's freedom there. When it comes to her sexuality, it is really problematic for any religion to accept that. So let's not comment on how the Islam functions, but when we look at it from women's and more so sexuality point of view, I don't think that it is anywhere different from any the Hindus, whatever the Hindu morality operates.
Any more questions? You can raise your hand. Okay. So there's one question by Rachel. Sort of comment. Yeah. Just give me a moment, please. Yeah. Yeah. So Rachel is saying Ambedkar's idea of social justice in the constitution address the root cause of endogamy. Does it apply for the victims? Or maybe you can take another question together. So Mahesh has a question. Dalits and Muslims stood for each other in many instances. How should we see that incident? I think it's a follow-up question for your earlier.
Yeah. Okay, let me answer Rachel's question.
Sure.
What Ambedkar really wanted, I know, when I was, though we have read in our integrated studies and all Annihilation of Caste, but when I was reading Annihilation of Caste for this paper, actually he was trying to address the question of women's freedom rather than the so-called Hindu morality per se. And he excessively talks about the question of endogamy, because he says that once you break endogamy through intercaste marriages, then you can pave for the next level. And endogamy is not simple thing. You know, when we say that endogamy is all about marriage, but it's beyond that. How? Because the entire purity and pollution is that's rooted very much in the endogamy. So without cutting the roots of the purity and pollution, you cannot annihilate. But though Gandhi said about the annihilation of untouchability, not the caste, that's where Ambedkar differed. And that's where Ambedkar becomes a proponent of the radical equality. That's what Ashwari Kumar argues, that the social justice that he comes up with, of course, Ambedkar very openly, long ago, he said that even the upper caste men and women are the co-victims of the caste system. You know, interestingly, Gopal Guru gives this analysis that the idea of self-preservation makes the upper caste, especially Brahmins, not to come out of their Brahminhood. Be it social privilege or be it any other thing that they are thriving upon, but that self-preservation makes them to have this false pride in the so-called Brahminhood, and that's how they try to preserve it. And that already Ambedkar argues it as something like, even the when it comes to the pedagogy of the oppressed, we can put it clearly that they are also co-victims, but they know the advantage what they can make of. So there is always a class that Ambedkar clearly mentions, priesthood, the priest class. They try to protect the privileges for them. So yes, this social justice, whatever Ambedkar is addressing through his constitutional morality. Of course, Rajiv Bhargava and others said that this is universally, Ambedkar's constitutional morality is universally applicable, and that is a source of liberation for the mankind, especially for Indian context. That's what most of the moral, constitutional morality scholars agreed upon. Someone else said.
Which question is there? And then there is another question by Saidulu. What are Ambedkar's views on caste killings and solutions to it? And then there is another question. We can go to that later.
Yeah. So, and Mahesh question is there, right? Mahesh said that
Muslims stood for each
Muslims.
other. How should we speak against it?
See, there is no doubt when Ambedkar was really establishing one party after the other. Once he floated All India Scheduled Caste Federation, then he came to another party, Republic of India, Labour Party. These things, when you see his journey, let's learn from Ambedkar how Ambedkar wanted us to address this problem. He wanted to really all of the subaltern groups to stand together to fight the oppression. That's what very clear. But whenever there is a whenever there is a caste-ridden politics within the labor movement, within the anti-caste movements and all, so he always tried to come up with an alternative. So when he was about to convert from Hinduism to something Buddhism, most of the religious groups approached him because Dalits would massively convert to some other thing. So they were seeing the number alone. So in that context, even Islamic group also came to him and asked that if you convert to Islam, we will try to provide whatever you really want, can help you empower in terms of economic mobility as well. But he, with all the due respect to their religious sentiments, he declined it. Because what he was trying to see, you can have this solidarity to oppose the oppression, but you cannot really become part of something that really, operates on the similar lines. Ambedkar already censored that there is already Ashraf Sayyids who wield more power against the other lower caste, the lower ranks of the Islam group. There is a movement, Pasmanda movement, which is already addressing. So, to my knowledge, until the demolition of Babri Masjid, no Muslim stood by Dalit cause. And so after that, Muslims started speaking about the grand solidarity of opposing the majoritarian rule and all. Again, but I think if I have to take a stand, I should address or understand this particular solidarity thing from the Pasmanda movement. It is because they are the victims and they can be the gateway to understand how the Islamic Brotherhood can extend their helping hand or solidarity to the Dalit cause. So until we don't address and stand by Pasmanda movement, I don't think there is no point in mere talking about this solidarity thing. So caste
I
killing
do
and so.
yeah.
Sorry. See, caste killings, I think Anupama Rao, she gave this an interesting contemporary analysis about the caste violence. Though Ambedkar laid the foundation, so she came up with this argument that the violence of recognition. When you see the pattern of caste violence, once it was the uh, Kshatriyas and the Brahmins who were perpetuating violence, physical violence against the Dalits. After the independence, though we have the liberal constitution, it is the dominant non-Brahmin upper caste. Those who were said to be the Shudras, be it Reddis or Kammas or anybody, non-Brahmin upper caste, they were in the forefront in perpetuating this violence. Next, when we see the post-Karamchedu Sunduru events, it were the OBCs, be it Boyas in Lakshimpet or Patapalli in Telangana, or in case of Madhuka's honor killing, it were Munur Kapur's case. So these were said to be the perpetuators of the violence against Dalits. So, why do these so-called upper caste technically, or the dominant caste, have to indulge in violence against Dalits is because to legitimize their caste privileges and caste pride within the Hindu fold, they resort to the violence against the Dalits, and they try to establish themselves on par with the upper caste. That's what the Anupama Rao argues. I think Ambedkar, in his Annihilation of Caste, he talks about the priest class, which tries to guard the privileges of the so-called Brahmins and all. Similarly, the same thing, Sanskritization is the root cause of the perpetual violence against the Dalits. So I think that's what the Ambedkarite perspective comes up. Another thing, Suresh.
Yeah, even I had a similar question, and I'm glad Suresh has posed it. Why we see only issues when a woman coming from upper caste to marry a lower caste man, but we haven't seen any such instances where upper caste men having relationship with lower caste women? Why is their nature of caste changing from one to another?
Yeah, actually, this is a direct, this is really an important question. True. Suresh, the thing is that Ambedkar long ago said that he will assess the progress of the society based on the progress of the woman that she achieved. Woman being upper caste woman is also, like any other co-victim in the caste, is subjected to all the inequalities that perpetuated by the caste system. Of course, for various reasons, when we see Ambedkar's analysis of the endogamy and surplus women, especially the practice of sati, I think there we can find the solution that in the practice of sati, no upper caste man is killed. It is the upper caste woman who is killed, and it is done with all the religious sanctity. So the thing is that the surplus woman is always seen as a problem for the caste purity and caste morality, so that if there is a surplus woman in the upper caste society, she might go out of the caste morality and whatever the community norms, and may have an affair or may marry outside the caste, and eventually lead to something like pollution of the kinship. So that's how they place honor of the community on the shoulders of the upper caste women. And that's how they kill their women in the name of sati. And if any other lower caste men tries to marry upper caste women, they can't tolerate it, because that becomes uh, a, that becomes a matter of their honor, and also they know that their entire community will be polluted. So again, when upper caste men having marital or love kind of relationship with the lower caste woman, yes, it is also not sanctioned, but you see that when their honor is located on the body of the woman, they don't see a lower caste woman as a source of honor for themselves. It's not their honor. They think that it is, of course, Manu sanctions this kind of relationship, and they think that it is upper caste men's privilege to have access to the bodies of the lower caste women. And when we read the caste practices from deep south, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, including Nayar women, those who are said to be the dominant caste, but if we go back to colonial period itself, we can see that the no non-Brahmin woman is allowed to wear cover their breast. If they have to wear anything, if they are covering, they have to pay the tax. And that's how the source of the honor is located more on the upper caste woman, and she can be punished she can be killed if she crosses, and they can kill the boy also from the lower caste. But when they have access to the other lower caste women, they think that it is legitimate to have. And for your reference, I think it is there in Telugu. Tapi Dharmarao has written a wonderful book, why there are abusive sculptures on the temples. In Telugu it is Devalayala Meeda Bhoota Bommalu. In this particular book, I think Dharmarao also gives a great references from Ambedkar later in his writings, but this particular book, I think, can be a good source for understanding how this happens, because the sexuality is codified and monitored by the religious text, and the temple has been the source of all these things, according to Dharmarao. So he says that women are reaching her puberty is said to go through certain process. So where the so-called the temple priest will have the first time sex with that girl. So this is what he discusses. He says that this is sanctioned by the script. That I think we can see it even in the practice of Devadasis also. Who are these Devadasis? All of them are lower caste women, and they are legitimately taken over. They are subjected to all sorts of the exploitation, sexual exploitation, political, social, and they are deprived of their womanhood also altogether. So, this is how the caste sanctions all these so-called sexual practices for both men and women. And also there is an element of this thing, that masculinity. So the masculinity is nothing but the upper caste patriarchy here. They can decide what ought to be there in terms of choosing a partner for women within their community and from men from outside the community. So this is how the honor is another technique of governing the bodies of men and women, and that's how they discipline the men and women in the Indian society. So I think that could suffice.
Thank you, Ashok. So there's a question by Subhani Sheikh. So he's asking, recently South Indian movies, in the last 5 years, we observed that hero from Dalit background loves an upper caste woman, and those movies end up with a sad ending. For instance, Kanche, Uppana, Color Photo, Love Story, Sri Devi Soda Center, etc. So do you think such movies are encouraging honor killings by depicting such endings?
See, we can argue that the culture industry has its own impact on our society. But the thing is that there is a movie, I think, Perumal Periyum, something like that. So in which the justification for the honor killings is said to be that, it is killing a Dalit boy for crossing his limits is nothing but a sacrifice to lineage god. So certainly these things are said to be educating people on these vital social issues, but as we are already caste ridden with all the entrenched practices, sometimes it happens that they might also ignite certain caste passions and might lead to these things. And that is the difference when we see these sad endings. And the purpose of culture industry, though we have differences with Vishwanatha, he made a film on inter-caste love, and he tried to give a subtle solution that a woman has a choice, and she can exercise her choice of choosing a partner, and that doesn't go against the dharma. That's what he wanted to say. But these movies, the recent movies, whatever you are mentioning, said to be a bit radical enough to show that all are not really, everything is not having a happy ending. But I think that people should take it in a sensitization thing rather than this thing.
Right. Actually, Ashok, if I may, before we move on to Mohan's question and Bhavana's question, I just want to ask you one, because we're in this topic. So do you think Foucault in his studies, or even Ambedkar or otherwise, do they propose any way of breaking out of it other than exogamy? So it's like, are there any counter ideologies or counter actions, thoughts or perspectives that operate counter to biopower, the logic of biopower, how it operates? Are there any mechanisms that you see in those?
Yeah, for Foucault is one who exposes the system, but really doesn't come up with any kind of answer. For him, the thing is that we should understand whenever he gives the analysis of the biopolitics in his lectures. So he wanted us to understand how the so-called modernity landed us. Where did it take us to? So most of the modern scholars and the modern states, whatever the so-called brutal killings, are said to be pre-modern, nasty, ancient, uncivilized activities. But he still wants us to understand that these things are really reinforced in the modern society as well through different means. So he says that whatever the so-called, let's say, the religious modern morality existed in the pre-modern society is reinforced in a different form in our modern society. So whatever the religion did long ago in the pre-modern society is done by the school, again in the name of morals, is done by the state, is done by the family again. So for us, he wants us to understand that we cannot rely on modernity, which is said to liberate us. So though people argue that modernity is not a finished project, but for Foucault, he says that it really fettered us further and it crippled us further, that we cannot imagine beyond modern solutions. So for him, we should raise beyond this modernity and aspirations raised by the modernity and find a solution. But he really doesn't explicitly give any answer to that. But whatever, I can infer with my limited readings of his works and all, and whatever the Foucauldian scholars argue is that this is something like there is always a way out, that you can make use of the modern sources. If you think that modernity can liberate, you are wrong. So, but we should grapple with the art of governance exercised by the state, So we already moved from the liberal way of governance to the neoliberal era. So he wants us to understand the dynamics of the governance, dynamics of the societal hierarchy. Then we should reframe our strategy. That's what he infers, but he doesn't really explicitly argue anything as such. For Ambedkar, so I think Aishwari Kumar, who came up with a book on titled Radical Equality, that he says that whatever Ambedkar project is more radical than what we see through the constitution morality. So he spoke about the social democracy. So I think Balgopal comes up with an interesting observation that unfortunately Ambedkar was understood and valorized for his appeal for the political power. Of course, it is an important element, but most of the Dalit movements, I think Kalekuri Prasad was also hinting at here only, that they stopped there only, that they got stuck with the political power, saying that it is a master key and all, but they could not strategize any social revolution, something social harmony that Ambedkar, something like social democracy that Ambedkar was arguing for. Ambedkar clearly mentioned that no political democracy or economic democracy sustains without the social democracy. So I think if at all any movement on the lines of the social solidarity has to come up, it should come up on those lines. I think that could be sustainable enough.
Actually, I think the next two questions sort of relate to that, where Mohan Rao is asking that what is the role of the state to prevent such kind of incidents? And where Bhavna is also asking how people's mindset can be changed, because everyone wants ijat. So should government make people aware about that? And I've got another question in a private chat where they're asking that if you get an opportunity, what kind of policy can you implement to abolish or control to an extent the endogamy system? I think these three questions are sort of related, so maybe you can respond to that.
Yeah. Actually, government has placed all the institutional mechanisms to address these things. Now, we cannot say that there is no legal remedy for these kind of things. Yes, there is. After Karam Chedu, we witnessed a tremendous act prepared by legendary bureaucrat like S.R. Shankaran, SC/ST Atrocity Act, that to prevent the atrocities and violence against the weaker sections. But the next thing, another important institutional mechanism is that the Ministry of Social Justice gives financial assistance to the inter-caste couple and also the legal protection. There are a lot of legal protections and also financial aid for these couples. If let's say that someone submits an inter-caste marriage certificate to the Ministry of Social Justice, they give outrightly, I think, 2 lakh immediately. And if the couple can request, they can increase the amount also. It depends, but there is a financial assistance as well. And also, other institutional mechanism is that if they want to start any enterprise, I mean, these are there in the provisions for the safeguarding their interest and all, their children. So their children education and all can be reimbursed. But most of these things are not known to the people also. And because Government of India just gives a notification and ends there. So that is unfortunate thing, but whoever applied also have got benefited out of these things. So, but though it is minimal, but the state has its own mechanism to address it. And another thing that there is a problem with, I think this is my personal opinion, whenever, of course, I'm not finding any fault with the jurisprudence, but at times I really feel that our Indian judiciary is still lagging or struggling with the colonial structures. Something I really think that to address something of this sort, honor killings and atrocities against the weaker sections, even S.R. Shankaran argued and other eminent bureaucrats and also scholars have already argued that there should be a separate tribunal to deal with these things. And also the thing is that the judiciary should understand that when there is something like atrocity and something like dishonor killing, the victim really cannot prove that the perpetuator did it. Actually, jurisprudence says that accused is not liable until the crime is proved. So we need to have a different intervention in this criminal procedure so that the culprit can be nabbed quickly and punished as soon as these incidents take place. And also, something more remunerative. I mean, already government is giving rewards. They can increase the amount. And also, I think, some of the scholars are arguing, activists are saying that if, let's say that there is a quota for the inter-caste marriage couple and their children in the education and employment, that might help to some extent. Since there is EWS quota, why can't we have something like this? Is again for the benefit of the society only. So this needs an overall approach. We really cannot say that one public policy solve these things. Moreover, the problem is rooted in the social system, so we need to have an engagement with the societal dynamics as well. I think so. I'm not saying that Gandhian approach is altogether correct, but we need people like Gandhi as well, where he tried to, Gandhi himself organized a lot of intercaste marriages. And in case of Andhra Pradesh, most of the atheist movement led by the forefathers of Samaram and Lavanam, they were ardent Gandhians. They performed, with all the help of the priest again, performed the intercaste marriages. And also they took active help from the Arya Samaj as well. So I think this needs a collaborative approach rather than, as long as Dalits speak about the annihilation of caste and intercaste marriages, this becomes the problem of Dalits alone. So if we really can, but again, they also should be generous enough, not generous, I'm saying empathetic enough to come out in open that they should work with the Dalit movement. They should not see this, even Arya Samaj, be it Arya Samaj or be it Gandhian movement, should not think that this is Dalit problem and Dalits should only solve. No, they should also take up it and they should collaborate with it, and that's how things can change. That functional unity and collaborative approach might help.
Actually, I was just thinking to ask you a follow-up question on this regard, and you have arrived at that point of collaboration, where like suppose Bell Hooks also argues that patriarchy, the victims are not just women, even men are victims of patriarchy. Similarly, for the caste system, it's just not just those who are at the receiving end. In very subtle ways, even the upper caste is being affected by the overall caste system in different ways. So do you think, suppose places like schools, colleges, or even workspaces, where you have an interaction, a dialogue, a friendly dialogue, and when they're sharing spaces, even in informal settings, will make a difference? Because I would say in a place like University of Hyderabad, where there is active discussion, you get to actually, like, everybody gets to interact with each other and understand each other from what sides they are coming from, and there is an education. So do you think it will actually help in that sense?
Yeah, true. Actually, without engagement or a continuous dialogue, we cannot really solve these problems. Now, let's learn from Ambedkar and Gandhi again. They were two different poles, and they were trying to argue for the same thing in a different ways again. But you see the way they engaged. They criticized, they appreciated each other, they criticized each other, and they differed on many things. But yet they were having a dialogue. And see, until we don't engage in the dialogue, we really can't communicate the problem. The first thing that, again, who should initiate it? Luckily, we were in the place like University of Hyderabad, and it compelled us to have discussions, be it in the classroom debates or the outside. So yeah, but how does that happen? That can only happen if the institution takes something like re-education kind of clubs. People, I also understand that it's difficult for most of the adults and adolescents to unlearn things that they have learned from the family and their everyday life. So for that, school can do it. College can do. That's a good idea. But again, there should be a genuine effort. Whatever Jyotiba Phule did in his schools, that can happen, but provided if they have some integrity, if they are really committed for the class, can bring such thing. That can happen. But having said that, the schools and colleges are not even exception to the caste practices, right?
Absolutely. You're right. If you have some more time, we can take up, there are 2 questions and we can end there.
Yeah.
Right. So there's one question, another question by Saidulu. Have you come across within community killings, that is Dalit community, on the grounds of economic stability? If yes, then how do you see it with caste killings?
Yes, there are killings, caste killings and community killings for, ranging from Karam Chedu to other things. Most of the rights activists, be it Bal Gopal or Professor Gopal or Sheshaya or anybody, what they have noticed in the caste atrocities for the economic empowerment of Dalits is that most of the upper caste men, especially the dominant non-Brahmin upper caste, could not digest that the Dalit boys and girls could not digest that Dalit boys and girls are dressing well and they are speaking textual language. They are not saying Dora anymore. They are not calling anybody Ayya or anything. So that hurt them, anybody. That hurt their ego, that hurt their privileges, emotionally. So they engaged in such activities that they attacked the entire community. In case of, you take Patapalli, what happened? A few Dalit boys have gone outside their village and have studied, and they came up with good dressing sense and everything, and they were, the fellow OBC communities could not digest it, and the way they responded to this kind of progress, the very little progress because of the reservations, is that whenever there is a death in the village, in the Patapalli, the dead body was buried in the Dalit houses. They could demolish a Dalit house, Dalit hut, and bury a dead body there. And they say that this is our graveyard. This happened in Patapalli. This happened in Lakshmipet. This again, and also in case of Kairlanji, for having 2 acres of land, and the level of atrocity we can't even imagine. The entire, the so-called upper caste men and women forgot their humanity, and they made the son to rape his mother and children, his sister. And it is beyond our imagination. I'm telling that this is what the pride, this is what the honor they think of. These things are really, hypersensitive, and they have a lot of historical legacy behind these things.
The last question by Prem Kumar. So speaker's comparative reference of caste system and church demands some clarification. The church is classified according to economic status, and its norms and rules of control are the same for all classes. In India, caste is graded based on socio-economic parameters, untouchability and labor. If he clarifies biopolitics using both boundaries and the notion of honor killings would be more clear. Prem.
Yeah, Prem, actually, similarly, yeah, when Foucault speaks about biopolitics, he says that the Christian morality is equally applied to everybody, that one should not have any kind of any kind of language, vocabulary, actions of sexuality prescribed by the church. Similarly, the caste system, the so-called Manu laws, also say that you cannot go beyond what is prescribed in your daily life, from your cultural, social, and political realm to your sexual life as well. So that's how when we take church and Manu as an institution of religion in regulating every individual and their behavior, so there we can see it is all the laws are equally applied to individuals. But in case of Manu, there are different laws for different communities. And this, when different communities break their codified laws, then comes the operation of the biopolitics. So that's where I tried to bring Foucault into the norms, the so-called genealogy of morality that Foucault brings in. So there we can see that whenever there is a violation of codified laws prescribed by the church, and in Indian case it is Manu, or the so-called caste system. So that's the biopolitics reflecting in the form of sometimes violence and all.
Yeah, I think this is a topic where the questions would never end, and it's a very important as well as very intense topic for a discussion. We could go on for hours, but we have to call it a day. And so thank you so much, Ashok, for patiently answering all the questions, and listening to your talk actually gave more thought, more food for thought. And in a ways that we did not think earlier, especially in theorizing. We keep hearing about the news articles, we keep hearing about it, but to see it in a broader lens and going into deeper roots of understanding, this is an excellent talk. So thank you very much for once again agreeing to be here today. And this talk will be uploaded on Radio Sophia. And it's a great pleasure to have you, because Ashok has also been my classmate in Hyderabad Central University. And through him, I have also learned a great deal about caste and understanding of it. So thank you very much for that.
Similarly, even I also learned many things from our classmates and you. Yeah, it's always mutual to learn things.
Thank you, guys. So I'll be ending the meeting now.